Welcome back, everyone, to another Granogen Deep Dive. Today, we're taking a look at the science behind dental implants.
That's right. We're going to be talking all about those little titanium posts that act like artificial tooth roots.
Exactly. I'm sure there are some interesting stories about how dental implants first came about.
Oh, there are definitely some good ones. We've come a long way from those early attempts at replacing missing teeth. It's pretty amazing to think about.
So take us back in time. Where did it all begin?
Well, the idea of replacing missing teeth is ancient. Like, we're talking thousands of years ago. People have been trying to fill those gaps for a long, long time.
Really? Like, what did they use?
You name it. Seashells, carved stones, even animal teeth. They tried it all.
It's amazing to think that even our ancestors cared about having a full set of teeth. But I bet those early attempts weren't exactly successful.
Yeah, they were more about looks and symbolism than actually working properly. But hey, you gotta start somewhere, right?
So when did things start to change?
Things really started to pick up in the 20th century. That's when the groundwork for modern dental implants was laid.
Okay, what happened then?
Well, there were a few key discoveries, like people started to realize that some metals, like titanium, could be implanted in the body without causing problems.
So that's when titanium entered the picture.
Exactly. And you know what? This discovery wasn't even planned. It was a total fluke.
Wait, seriously, tell me more.
Okay, so researchers were testing out different materials, implanting them in animals to see how their bodies would react. And to their surprise, they found that titanium just integrated really well with the bone.
Who were some of these key players?
The most important figure in the history of dental implants has got to be Per-Ingvar Branemark. Back in the 1950s, he was a scientist in Sweden, and he was studying how bones heal, in rabbits, and he stumbled on something pretty amazing, actually.
Okay, I'm definitely intrigued.
So picture this Branemark is using these titanium chambers to watch the bone grow, and when he goes to take them out, he finds the bones actually fused to the titanium. It's incredible. Like, they were stuck together, totally inseparable.
Wow, so this was a total accident.
You got it. And it completely changed dentistry forever. He called this phenomenon osseointegration.
Osseointegration. So a chance discovery changed everything, huh?
That's wild. It's hard to believe that, like, metal and bone becoming one was just, found by chance.
It really was, and it totally shook things up in the dental world. At first, people were really skeptical about this idea of metal and bone fusing together. I mean, it sounds pretty crazy, right?
Okay, like something out of a sci-fi movie.
Right. But Branemark, he didn't give up.
He didn't.
No, he kept at it. He did a ton of research and clinical trials proving that these titanium implants were safe and they worked.
So basically, his persistence paid off.
It totally did. And because of that, dental implants are now widely accepted.
That's amazing. It really makes you think, like, what other groundbreaking stuff is just waiting to be discovered out there?
Oh, I'm sure there's tons of it.
Right. Well, titanium is special because of this thing it does. When it touches air or water, it forms this stable oxide layer on its surface.
So like a protective shield.
Exactly. And this layer, we call it TiO2, it's super resistant to corrosion. And get this, it doesn't react badly with the body's tissues.
So it's like titanium is wearing a disguise so our immune system doesn't even notice it.
That's a good way to put it. It's basically invisible to our bodies. And because of that, the bone can bond directly to the titanium.
Right.
And that's what creates that strong, solid base for those artificial teeth.
Wow, that is so cool. So we know this whole process of bone fusing to titanium is called osseointegration, right? But can you break it down for us? What's actually going on at the cellular level?
Okay, so imagine this. You put the implant in, right? And immediately your blood clots around it, and these inflammatory cells rush in to clean things up. It's like your body's first responders. And then come the builders, these cells called osteoblasts. They're responsible for making new bone.
And what do?
Well, they come to where the implant is and start laying down this new bone matrix right onto the titanium surface. Think of it like they're building the foundation for a new structure.
Ah, I get it. So they're the construction crew.
Yeah. And over time, this new bone keeps growing, it remodels itself, and eventually it fuses completely with the implant. It's like they become one. That's what makes dental implants so strong and long-lasting.
Our bodies are incredible, huh? But it also makes me wonder, if titanium is so successful, why are scientists even looking for alternatives?
Well, even though titanium is great, it does have a couple of downsides, like its color, for instance.
It's silver, right?
Yeah, and that can be a problem in certain areas of the mouth where the implant might show through the gums. Some people might prefer something that looks a bit more natural.
So not everyone wants a metallic flash when they smile?
Exactly. And that's where zirconia comes in. It's becoming a popular alternative, especially for folks who are concerned about aesthetics. Zirconia is a ceramic, so unlike titanium, it's white. It blends in really well with your natural teeth, especially in those visible areas. And just like titanium, it's biocompatible, meaning your body won't reject it.
Sounds like the best of both worlds. But is it as tough as titanium? We always hear about how strong titanium is.
It is strong, but it can be a bit more brittle than titanium, so there's a slightly higher chance of it fracturing, especially in areas where you bite down hard. And another potential downside is that zirconia can be a bit trickier to work with than titanium. It requires specialized tools and techniques, both for the dentist placing the implant and for the lab technician who makes the crown or bridge.
So it's a bit more demanding all around.
That's right. And since zirconia is relatively new, we don't have as much long-term data on how well it performs compared to titanium. We're still learning how it holds up over decades of use.
And one of the things that really blows my mind is this whole nanotechnology thing. It's just crazy to think we can manipulate materials at such a tiny scale.
It really is remarkable what's happening at the nanoscale. And for dental implants, nanotechnology is playing a huge role in making the bond between the implant and the bone even stronger.
Okay, so break it down for me. How does messing with things at such a tiny level actually make a difference?
Well, think about it this way. At the nanoscale, we can create all sorts of intricate patterns and textures on surfaces. And those patterns affect how cells interact with the material.
So it's like we're giving the cells a roadmap, telling them where to go and what to do.
That's a great way to put it. We're basically tricking those bone cells into thinking the implant is a natural part of their environment.
Tricking the body into healing better? I love it. But how do they even create these patterns on the implant surface?
There are a few different techniques they use. One is called acid etching. It's basically using a special acid solution to make tiny pits and grooves on the surface.
So it's like roughing up the surface a bit, giving those bone cells something to grab onto.
Exactly. And then there's sandblasting, where they use tiny particles to create a rougher, more textured surface.
It's amazing how something as simple as changing the texture can make such a big difference in how the body responds.
It just goes to show how important it is to understand how materials and biological systems interact at the most basic level.
What about those lasers we talked about before? How do they fit into all of this?
Ah, yes. Lasers are incredibly precise. They give us the ability to create even more intricate and controlled patterns on the implant surface.
So it's like a 3D printer for implants, but at a microscopic level.
Exactly. And the research in this area is really promising. Studies have shown that these nanotextured surfaces can significantly increase how much the bone comes into contact with the implant, leading to faster healing and stronger integration. And I think it's important to talk about implant failure, even though no one really wants to think about it.
Yeah, you're right. It's definitely the elephant in the room. So let's address it head on. What actually causes an implant to fail?
Well, implant failure can generally be divided into two categories,
Sure.
early failure and late failure.
Okay, so what's the difference?
Early failure usually happens within the first few months after the implant is placed. It's often caused by problems with the initial healing process. Late failure, on the other hand, happens after the implant has already been successfully integrated for a while, usually years later. One of the most common causes is something called peri-implantitis.
Peri-implantitis, that sounds serious.
It can be. It's an inflammatory condition that affects the tissues around the implant. It's kind of like gum disease, but it specifically targets the area around the implant. And if it's not treated, it can lead to bone loss, which can eventually cause the implant to loosen and fail.
We talked about those nanotextured surfaces and how they can help bone grow. Can you explain how they actually work at a cellular level?
Sure. The key to understanding how nanotextured surfaces work is to appreciate how sensitive cells are to their environment. They can sense even the tiniest changes in their surrounding. And at the nanoscale, the surface of a material can have a huge impact on how cells interact with it. By creating specific nanopatterns on the implant surface, we can actually direct how the bone cells behave. These nanopatterns can influence all sorts of things, like how well the bone cells stick to the surface, how fast they divide and multiply, and how they develop into mature bone-forming cells.
Hold on, break that down for me. What do those terms mean exactly?
Sure. Adhesion refers to how well the cells attach to the surface. Proliferation is the rate at which they divide and multiply. And differentiation is the process by which they specialize and become bone-forming cells.
So by creating these nanopatterns, we're basically helping the bone cells do their job more efficiently.
Exactly. There are also some exciting developments happening in the field of biomimetic materials.
Biomimetic. That's a new one. Tell me more.
Biomimetic materials are designed to mimic the structure and properties of natural tissues, like bone. The idea is that if we can create materials that are more similar to the body's own tissues, we can achieve better integration and reduce the risk of complications.
So it's like taking inspiration from nature to design better implants.
Exactly.
So what are some examples of biomimetic materials being used for implants?
One really cool example is the development of porous titanium implants. These implants have tiny holes throughout their structure, kind of like a sponge. And that structure is designed to mimic a type of bone called cancellous bone, which is the spongy inner part of bone that's full of blood vessels and bone marrow.
What's the advantage of that?
Well, those pores allow bone cells to grow into the implant itself, creating a much stronger and more stable connection. It's like giving the bone a three-dimensional scaffold to grow on.
So instead of just attacking to the surface of the implant, the bone is actually becoming a part of it.
Exactly. And we can even coat these porous implants with bioactive substances, like calcium phosphate, to further enhance bone growth. And there's another important area of research that we haven't talked about yet: antibacterial strategies.
Oh, right. We talked about how infection can be a big problem, especially in the early stages of healing. What are researchers doing to fight that?
That's a huge focus of research, and there are a lot of promising approaches being explored.
Okay, I'm all ears. Tell me about some of these strategies.
One approach is to add antibacterial agents right into the implant material itself. And one of the most promising agents is silver. Silver has been known for its antimicrobial properties for centuries, and we can incorporate it into titanium implants in different ways. Another approach is to create surfaces that naturally resist bacterial attachment.
So instead of killing the bacteria, we're just making it harder for them to stick around.
Exactly. We can do that by modifying the surface chemistry or topography of the implant. One way to do that is to create surfaces that are very hydrophilic.
Hydrophilic, does that mean they love water?
That's right. And it turns out that bacteria don't like to stick to surfaces that are hydrophilic. They prefer surfaces that are hydrophobic, meaning they repel water. And there are other approaches too, like creating surfaces with nanopatterns that physically block bacteria from attaching, or using coatings that release antibacterial agents slowly over time.
So it's a multi-pronged attack.
Yeah.
We're preventing attachment, killing any bacteria that do manage to stick around, and making the surface more hospitable to the body's own cells.
Exactly. It's all about creating an environment that promotes healing and integration while minimizing the risk of infection.
It's amazing how much thought and research goes into every aspect of dental implant design.
It really is.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the fascinating world of dental implants, what's the one thing you want our listeners to remember?
I think the most important message is that dental implants are an amazing example of human ingenuity. We've come a long way from those accidental discoveries to the cutting-edge research happening today. It's all driven by wanting to make people's lives better.
It's pretty inspiring, huh?
It really is.
So to our listeners, keep that curiosity alive and never stop learning about the amazing world of science and technology.
And remember, a healthy smile can make a big difference in your life.
Until next time, happy exploring.